We'll start off by reflecting on Man City's 2-2 draw with Brighton in the Premier League last weekend. It was an entertaining game. I think both teams looked like scoring on every attack, and I think they probably could and should have been more goals from both teams. But in the end, the spoils were shared. What's your assessment of City's performance, Stephen, and the result overall against a fellow Champions League chasing club in Brighton?
Yeah, it's hard for City fans to sort of approach these results without sort of reframing, where we are and what our expectations are. For me, if I look at it in the course of what I expected from the start of the season, obviously it's a sort of disappointing result at home. Even with Brighton's quality, you're still expecting to hopefully try and get a win there. But look at it where we are now, aside very much in transition. I mean, that's the easiest way to put it. And I think ultimately it's a reasonably fair performance. It's a decent point, I would argue. I don't think it was great considering the fact that we were, it went in front twice, and it feels like we've thrown 2 points away, and it does feel that way. And the same issues are sort of plaguing City in terms of individual mistakes, not being able to keep a clean sheet, a little bit wasteful in front of goal, which ultimately points down to quality for what it's worth. But I think on the balance of things, your reflection, I think the point was fair. I don't think any damage has really been done. It was an opportunity missed, but looking at the table right now, we're still sat in fifth. Then you look at Bournemouth not being able to capitalise. Obviously, Newcastle didn't play and they had a good weekend, but we're still in the top five, which is basically all that matters right now. If we can stay there despite the results, we'll be fine.
Yeah, I think in this game there was probably both good and bad aspects from City's performance. I think on the downside, once again those defensive mistakes and those errors in possession were frustratingly on show, and they need to be cut out really by City now if they are to claim those important wins now in the final few games of this season. In the fullback areas, I think City were exploited quite a lot by Brighton's pacey forwards. Lewis struggled a bit against Matoma, and
Yeah.
Guardiola's still got that mistake in him, hasn't he, that he needs to cut out. I don't think it really helped either that Savinho and Doku didn't really track back defensively. But on the positive side, one of those was Omar Marmoush. His performance, he was, obviously involved in both goals in the first half, winning the penalty and scoring a brilliant goal for himself. And he was just an energetic, such an energetic performance from him, and covered so much ground. How impressed were you by his performance?
Yeah, Marmoush looks a proper footballer. He looks like he has the right attitude. There's a very Aguero-esque strike actually for his goal. A beautiful finish from 20 yards, reminding me of the Swansea goal from Aguero on his debut. Looks really good. I mean, I was very impressed with his overall game, not just his goal, because that one grabbed the headlines. But he won the penalty as well. Right position, turned inside, drew the foul. But it wasn't just that; it was a link-up play, a couple of lovely little through balls, good movement, finding the pockets of space, as Guardiola would say. The guy looks confident, and the main worry when you've got a person tearing up the Bundesliga is, can they take that confidence into a new league? Can they find the same space and have the same effect? And it looks to me, that Marmoush absolutely has that potential. He looks like a quality footballer. I like him an awful lot. I think the most important thing, obviously, is quality, but you have to have that self belief. You have to believe you're good enough to impact a game at this level. And the guy reeks of confidence. Really, really self assured. So much talent, good footwork, good movement, good link up play. Of course, an excellent finish, created another chance. I've got zero doubts whatsoever that with a fully functioning Manchester City at their best, that guy's a 20 goal season player with 10, 15 assists as well, because he looks like he wants to be involved in everything. And to be honest, it's a little bit of a might be a slight warning for maybe someone like Phil Foden, who's not had a good season, who should be the guy in that role, arguably, given last year and given Kevin De Bruyne's, decline with age and so on. But yeah, it was good from Marmoush, and I also sort of agree with what you're saying before about the other players. I think Doku and Savinho, so lively, the pair of them. There's been a lot of narrative around Doku after the game about, are the dribbles worth it? And I've sort of delved into that a little bit, and it's hard to know where I stand on Doku, because one part of me feels like, he could be a great player. One part of me feels like he might just be the same player, until the end of his career. Because there's a lot of players you see have that much skill, but they don't really develop much further because that's just who they are. And doesn't mean he's going to ever be a bad player. He's still very good. Don't get me wrong, and such a unique skill set. One that I'd rather have in my squad than not. But I do wonder, how far those dribbles will take him. And it could be said that maybe he's a guy built to be in an aggressive transition side where you've got loads of runners around him, because the amount of times he beat his man at the weekend with his pace and dribbling, but then he was so far up the pitch compared to everyone else. And you look into the box and it'd just be Marmoush at the back, not Marmoush, sorry, Haaland at the back post, marked by three Brighton players, and there's no way to pick him out. I just wonder, if can we find the best way to sort of make the most of his skill set too? Because I think we need to do that. And Savinho, look, the guy needs to get better at finishing as well. He does. He's young, 20 years old. He wouldn't be the first attacking player who gradually goes through the gears in front of goal, and before you know it, 23, 24, banging 15, 20 goals a season. It happens all the time. I think Savinho noticed the tendency to uh, not really strike with conviction when shooting from the right hand side. When he's got to open his body up, he's not a natural at that. I was looking at his goals from when he was at Girona, and both the goals he scored at City actually have come from the left way, striking across the ball. He just seems to be a lot more comfortable doing that for whatever reason, but a little bit more venom. So I think Savinho, Doku, they were both good in their own way in terms of getting into the right positions, but there's question marks about if not their ability, their current maybe um, effect on this side, if that makes sense. Like Doku, great dribbler, but are we getting enough bodies around him to make it useful? Savinho, getting into positions really well and working really hard to create chances for us, but he can't. Can he take them right now? So ultimately, that could just be age, but it can be frustrating, and I think it points down to, I would argue, just right now a lack of real quality in terms of where City are. Like go back 2 years ago, it would be Mahrez, and he scores one of those chances. Go back a few years earlier, it'd be Sane or Sterling, and they score one of those chances too. And then defensively, I think Vardiola's making mistakes right now, and it does make me pine for the defensive security of Ake, who is so good one on one, and doesn't let the attacker, sorry, dribble 20 yards into the box, sort of, and doesn't let he's very standoffish right now in Vardy. He just needs to be better than that. But yeah, I sort of agree with your overall assessment. Really, I think Marmoush looks great. I think the wingers have so much ability, but it's a lot of its potential right now, and I think that's where City are coming up short because I think Brighton are a cracking side, but they're an example of how often they are a side with potential, and this is why their players tend to move on. They go to usually inverted commas bigger side, with all due respect to Brighton, and that's where they fulfil their ability usually. But the problem is Brighton, they struggle to get in the Champions League because most of their players are really good, but they are still potential, a lot of them. And I think City have got one or two players like that, where usually we had the world class players already, but that conclusion leads us to just being a side sort of the similar quality right now to Brighton, to Forest, to Bournemouth, and all these sides, which is obviously not where we want to be.
Yeah, and just going back to Doku and Savinho, they're obviously two very young wingers, lots of promise about them. They've shown signs of promise, but it's ultimately just they're just lacking that end product, aren't they? That would really take them both to the next
Yeah.
level. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, they are. I think in Doku's case, I think he'll ever be a great goal scorer. I don't think it seems to be his skill set, but I do think he could create a lot more chances. I think it is entirely down to a lack of movement around him. Imagine Doku with an overlapping fullback. Immediately the space he would get because he's got to beat two or three people at once every single time. He's really good at that, and I think the fact that he's so good at that maybe uh, doesn't then give him the support that he probably could actually benefit from because he can do it anyways. Let him do it on his own. But the problem is he's doing it, and then there's no one there to help him. And I think it doesn't matter how good you are a dribbler, you still need the movement around you. I think Savino's just age, really. I think he needs a better finishing from that side, as I was saying earlier. And yeah, I think they're both going to get better. I just don't know how much better they're going to get. But I would love to see them in a more confident, aggressive side. When your Rodri's there, the summer rebuild has kicked on a little bit, and they're a year older because they're both reasonably new to English football still. Savino's his first season, Doku's second season, both 22 and 20. Yeah, they've definitely not world class yet. Can they get there? Hopefully. Do they have the skill set? They do. But obviously a little bit of luck and timing and so on and hard work will take them to the next step